There are some women in history who never step onto a battlefield, who never command armies or draw swords, yet their presence quietly alters the course of empires. Their power does not announce itself with banners or war cries. It moves silently, through decisions, alliances, and moments of transition. Long after the clash of steel has faded, the consequences of their lives continue to echo across generations. This is the story of one such woman. A woman who stood between civilizations at a moment when the world itself was being reshaped. A woman who crossed the boundaries of faith, blood, and empire. A woman whose name history preserved, yet never fully explained. Her life remains suspended between certainty and silence, recorded yet incomplete. She was a Byzantine woman who entered the Ottoman world with the flow of time and became the wife of Orhan Bey. But the true significance of her life does not rest in whom she married. The deeper question remains unanswered even centuries later. Who was she, truly? And why does history hesitate when it comes to describing her role with full clarity? To understand her importance, one must first understand the world she stepped into. In the early 14th century, Anatolia was passing through one of the most fragile periods in its history. The old order was collapsing, and a new one had not yet fully formed. The Byzantine Empire, once the unrivaled power of the Eastern Mediterranean, was now eroding from within. Civil wars, economic strain, and political fragmentation had weakened its authority. Imperial power existed more in name than in reality, and entire regions operated beyond effective central control. At the same time, the Seljuk system that had once dominated Anatolia had already fallen into irreversible decline. What remained was a patchwork of frontier lordships, small, ambitious powers competing for survival, legitimacy, and land. Along these volatile borders, a new force was quietly consolidating itself: the Ottomans. They were no longer merely a nomadic or semi-nomadic tribe defined by seasonal movement and raiding. They were transforming into something more permanent. Slowly, deliberately, they were becoming a state. Their leaders understood that survival in this new age required more than courage in battle. It demanded political intelligence, strategic restraint, and long-term vision. This was a moment when power was no longer gained by the sword alone. Military strength mattered, but so did diplomacy, marriage alliances, and the careful management of religious and ethnic diversity. The Ottoman leadership had recognized a fundamental truth. Conquest achieved by force could be undone by instability, but conquest reinforced by legitimacy could endure. Marriage became one of the most effective tools in this strategy. It was not merely a personal union, it was a political instrument. Through marriage, borders softened, resistance weakened, and new identities were formed. It was within this uncertain and shifting political landscape that a young Byzantine woman entered Ottoman history. History remembers her as Asporca Hatun. Unlike many women of the early Ottoman period whose lives are obscured by legend, poetic exaggeration, or complete silence, Asporca Hatun stands out as a historically recorded figure. She appears not in folklore, but in documents. Not in myth, but in official records. Ottoman sources confirm that she was of Byzantine Christian origin. Though her exact lineage remains unknown, historians widely agree that she likely belonged to a noble or aristocratic family. Her background alone distinguished her from the many women brought into Ottoman households through warfare or captivity. The details of her early life remain frustratingly limited. Her birthplace is not recorded. Her father's name does not survive in the chronicles. The circumstances that led her from the Byzantine world into the Ottoman sphere are left largely unexplained. Yet despite these gaps, one fact remains unmistakably clear: her status. Asporca Hatun was not a slave. She was not an ordinary war captive. She was not taken as spoils of conquest. She entered Orhan Bey's household as a political decision. She was, in the fullest sense, a political bride. Her marriage to Orhan Bey occurred during a critical shift in Ottoman-Byzantine relations. Hostility had not vanished, but open warfare was increasingly giving way to negotiation, accommodation, and mutual survival. Orhan Bey himself embodied this transition. As the second ruler of the Ottoman dynasty, Orhan Bey inherited a frontier principality from his father, Osman, but he transformed it into something far more formidable. Under his leadership, the Ottomans developed administrative structures, minted coins, established institutions, and expanded their influence with calculated precision. This marriage was not born of romance, it was built on stability. By marrying a noble Byzantine woman, Orhan Bey sent a silent yet unmistakable message to both allies and enemies. The Ottomans were no longer temporary occupants of Anatolia. They were no longer outsiders pressing in from the margins. They were becoming legitimate heirs to the land itself. The impact of this union extended beyond the palace walls. It softened resistance among local Christian populations who now saw familiar blood and culture represented within the Ottoman ruling family. It reduced Byzantine hostility in certain regions, replacing absolute opposition with cautious coexistence. Asporca Hatun's conversion to Islam followed this union. This transformation carried deep symbolic weight. It was not merely a personal religious shift. It was a public declaration of a new identity aligned with a rising political order. Her conversion reflected the changing world around her, a world in which old boundaries were dissolving and new ones were being drawn. Yet Asporca Hatun's role was not confined to symbolism alone. She was not only the wife of a ruler, she was also a mother. Historical records state that she gave birth to Ibrahim Bey, and some sources also mention Halil Bey, though historians continue to debate this point. While neither son ascended the throne, their existence carried significant importance within early Ottoman society. In a dynasty still securing its legitimacy, the presence of male heirs strengthened claims to continuity and stability. Dynastic survival depended not only on conquest, but on succession. Asporca Hatun's children contributed to this foundation at a time when political marriages and multiple wives coexisted within the ruling household. Her influence, however, extended beyond family and lineage. Unlike many women of her era who remained confined to private life, Asporca Hatun left behind a documented and legally recognized legacy. In 1323, she established a charitable endowment, known as a waqf, in the city of Iznik. This foundation supported the poor, aided travelers, and sustained religious institutions. This act is critically important. Waqf deeds are not literary embellishments or later inventions. They are legal documents. Their existence proves beyond doubt that Asporca Hatun was an active participant in Ottoman civic and religious life. She was respected, acknowledged, and recognized within the administrative system of the state. She was not a silent presence hidden behind palace walls. She operated within the public and legal framework of the empire. Her authority may not have been military or imperial, but it was real. Over time, her identity became blurred by historical confusion. Asporca Hatun was often mistaken for Nilüfer Hatun, another Byzantine-born wife of Orhan Bey. The confusion is understandable. Both women shared similar origins. Both converted to Islam. Both occupied important positions within the Ottoman household. Yet history makes an essential distinction. Nilüfer Hatun was the mother of Sultan Murad I, whose accession to the throne carried her legacy directly into imperial power. Asporca Hatun, by contrast, was a secondary wife, but her influence was no less meaningful. Nilüfer Hatun's legacy continued through governance and political authority. Asporca Hatun's legacy endured through diplomacy, charity, and balance. Their roles differed, but their importance within the formation of the Ottoman state was equal. In modern times, popular culture has revisited Asporca Hatun's story. In the television series Kuruluş, Orhan, she is portrayed as a Byzantine princess, played by Alina Baz. This depiction amplifies drama and emotional tension, presenting her as an imperial figure. Historically, there is no definitive evidence that Asporca Hatun was an imperial princess. However, her noble Byzantine background and political marriage render the portrayal symbolically accurate. The series transforms historical probability into dramatic certainty, a familiar technique in historical storytelling. What remains undeniable is her broader significance. Asporca Hatun represents something rare in early Ottoman history, a woman whose power did not come from conquest, but from transition. She stood at the intersection of Christian Byzantium and Muslim Anatolia, at a frontier where identities, loyalties, and empires were being reshaped. Her life reminds us that the rise of the Ottoman Empire was not achieved solely on battlefields. It was also built in marriage halls, legal documents, charitable institutions, and quiet acts of integration. It was shaped by women who eased conquest through legitimacy, religious harmony, and diplomatic balance. Asporca Hatun is not remembered for wars. She is remembered for equilibrium. She did not rule the empire, but she helped sustain it during its most fragile and uncertain years. Her legacy lies not in domination, but in continuity. And as history turns its pages forward, her story serves as a reminder that some empires rise not by the sword, but by the bride.